Do you ever wonder if you've been marked? You survived the spectral sales event. You've seen the haunting results of life consumed by cheap thrills and impulse buys, courtesy of Wally Wimp and the Emporium. Now we move beyond the satire. Tonight we open the door to the true source of that mundane dread. This is the launchpad for a brand new series, Steel Shadows, Visions of Richard Matheson. Across 10 episodes, we will analyze how Matheson's iconic tales, from robot boxers and steel to the road rage paranoia of Duel, directly mirrored the shadows in his own life. We'll explore the real-life trauma of World War II veteran, the painful losses that informed his domestic horror, and the Hollywood frustrations that fueled his sharpest satire. The fear we confront tonight is more fundamental. It's the realization that you are merely expected to conform, expected to vanish into the relentless pattern of the ordinary. Prepare to venture into the mind of a master, prepare to see the world as Matheson did, where the uncanny twist is never far from the mundane truth. The curtain is up. The shadows are gathering. SL Tonight, Anthology, begins. Good evening, seekers of the psychological abyss, and welcome to SL Tonight, where we teeter on the brink of Richard Matheson's mind-bending horrors. The pioneer who penned 14 novels and 16 Twilight Zone episodes. I'm Felix Lebeski, your host for Steel Shadows, Visions of Richard Matheson, a series celebrating the man whose stories lampooned his career. World War II scars fueling inner turmoil, pulp roots evolving into edge of sanity tales. In the 1950s, Matheson was in California, writing for the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. Inspired by his own nightmares and Freudian psychology books that made him question sanity's limits. The Edge grew from that introspection, a tale of a man slipping into madness, reflecting his aim to blend sci-fi with mental unraveling. Published in 1958 in F and SF, it captures his skill at turning everyday doubts into existential dread, drawn from his highway incidents and family pressures. Behind the scenes, Matheson collaborated with Twilight Zone producers, but this story stayed in pulps, reflecting his frustration with Hollywood's limits and psychological depth. It's a window into what drew him to horror, the feature that one steps over the edge shatters reality, a theme that deepened with his son's illness. Let's balance on this razor's edge. It was almost 2 before there was a chance for lunch. Until then, his desk was snowbanked with demanding papers, his telephone rang constantly, and an army of insistent visitors attacked his walls. By 12, his nerves were pulling like violin strings knobbed to their tightest. By 1, the strings drew close to shearing. By 1:30, they began to snap. He had to get away, now, immediately. Flee to some shadowy restaurant booth, have a cocktail and a leisurely meal, listen to somnolent music. He had to. Down on the street, he walked beyond the zone of eating places he usually frequented, not wishing to risk seeing anyone he knew. About a quarter of a mile from the office, he found a cellar restaurant named Franco's. At his request, the hostess led him to a rear booth where he ordered a martini. Then, as a woman turned away, he stretched out his legs beneath the table and closed his eyes. A grateful sigh murmured from him. This was the ticket. Dim-lit comfort. Muzak thrumming at the bottom fringe of audibility. A curative drink. He sighed again. A few more days like this, he thought. I'm gone. Hi, Don. He opened his eyes in time to see the man drop down across from him. How goes it? What? Donald Marshall stared at him. God, what a day, what a day. He grinned tiredly. You too. I don't believe... Ah, the man said, nodding, pleased as the waitress brought the martini. That for me? Another, please. Drier than dry. Yes, sir, said the waitress, and was gone. There, said the man, stretching. No place like Franco's for getting away from it all, eh? Look here, said Marshall, smiling awkwardly. I'm afraid you've made a mistake. Hmm? The man leaned forward, smiling back. I say, I'm afraid you've made a mistake. I have? The man grunted. What did I do? Forget to shave? I'm liable to. No? he said as Marshall frowned. Wrong tie? You don't understand. What? Marshall cleared his throat. I'm not who you think I am. Huh? The man leaned forward again, squinting. He straightened up, chuckling. What's the story, Don? Marshall fingered at the stem of his glass. Yes, what's the story? He said, less politely now. I don't get you. Who do you think I am? Asked Marshall, his voice rising a little. The man began to speak, gaped a trifle, then began to speak again. What do you mean, who do I? He broke off as the waitress brought the second martini. They both sat quietly until she was gone. Now, said the man curiously. Look, I'm not going to accuse you of anything, said Marshall, but you don't know me. You've never met me. In your whole life. I know. The man couldn't finish. He looked flabbergasted. I don't know you? Marshall had to laugh. Oh, this is ludicrous. The man smiled appreciatively. I knew you were ribbing me, but you had me going for a second. Marshall put down his glass, the skin beginning to tighten across his cheek. I'd say this has gone about far enough. I'm in no mood for... Don, what's wrong? Marshall drew in a deep breath and let it waver out. Oh, well, I suppose it's an honest mistake. He forced a smile. Who do you think I am? The man didn't answer. He looked at Marshall intently. Well? Asked Marshall, beginning to lose patience. This isn't a joke? Now, look. No, wait, said the man, raising one hand. I suppose it's possible there could be two men who look so much alike they... He stopped abruptly and looked at Marshall. Don, you're not ribbing me, are you? Now listen to me. All right, I apologize. He sat gazing at Marshall for a moment, then he shrugged and smiled perplexedly. I could have sworn you were Don Marshall. Marshall felt something cold gathering around his heart. I am, he heard himself say. The only sound in the restaurant was that of the music and the delicate clink of silverware. What is this? You tell me. This is not a joke. Now see here. All right. The man raised both his hands in a conciliatory gesture. It's not a joke. You claim I don't know you. All right. Granting that leaves us with this. A man who not only looks exactly like my friend, but has the exact same name. Is this possible? Apparently so, said Marshall. Abruptly, he picked up his glass and took a momentary escape in the martini. The man did the same. The waitress came for their orders, and Marshall told her to come back later. What's your name? He asked then. Arthur Nolan. Marshall gestured conclusively. I don't know you, he said. There was a slight loosening of tension in his stomach. The man leaned back and stared at Marshall. This is fantastic. Utterly fantastic. Marshall smiled and lowered his eyes to the glass. Where do you work? American Pacific Steamship, Marshall answered, glancing up. He felt a beginning of enjoyment in himself. This was certainly something to take one's mind off the rack of the day. The man looked examiningly at him, and Marshall sensed the enjoyment fading. Suddenly the man laughed. You must have had one hell of a morning. What? No more. Listen, I capitulate, said Nolan, grinning. You're curdling my gin. Listen to me, damn it. The man looked startled. His mouth fell open, and he put his drink down. Don, what is it? He asked, concerned now. You do not know me. I do not know you. Will you kindly accept that? The man looked around as if for help. Then he leaned in close and spoke, his voice soft and worried. Don, listen, honestly, you don't know me? Marshall drew in a deep breath, teeth clenched against rising fury. The man drew back. The look on his face was suddenly frightening to Marshall. One of us is out of his mind, Marshall said. The levity he intended never appeared in his voice. Nolan swallowed raggedly. He looked down at his drink as if unable to face the other man. Marshall suddenly laughed. Dear Lord, what a scene. You really think you know me, don't you? The man grimaced. The Don Marshall I know also works for American Pacific. Marshall shuddered. That's impossible. No, said the man flatly. For a moment, Marshall got the notion that this was some sort of insidious plot against him, but the distraught expression on the man's face weakened the suspicion. He took a sip of his martini, then carefully set down the glass and laid his palms on the table as if seeking the reinforcement of a presence. American Pacific Steamship Lines? He asked. Man nodded once. Yes. Marshall shook his head abjurantly. No, he said. There's no other marshal in our office, unless, he added quickly, one of our clerks downstairs. You're an... The man broke off nervously. He's an executive. Marshall drew his hands in slowly and put them in his lap. Then I don't understand. He wished instantly he hadn't said it. This man told you he worked there? He asked quickly. Yes. Can you prove he works there? Marshall challenged, his voice breaking. Can you prove his name is really Don Marshall? Don, Well, can you? Are you married? Asked the man. Marshall hesitated, then clearing his throat, he said, I am. Nolan leaned forward. To Ruth Foster? He asked. Marshall couldn't hide his involuntary gasp. Do you live on the island? Nolan pressed. Yes, said Marshall weakly, but in Huntington? Marshall hadn't even the strength to nod. Did you go to Columbia University? Yes, but his teeth were on edge now. Did you graduate in June 1940? No! Marshall clenched at this. I graduated in January 1941. 41! Were you a lieutenant in the Army? Asked Nolan, paying no attention. Marshall felt himself slipping. Yes, he muttered. But you said, in the 87th Division? Now wait a minute. Marshall pushed aside the nearly empty glass as if to make room for his rebuttal. I can give you two very good explanations for this fool confusion. One, a man who looks like me and knows a few things about me is pretending to be me. Lord knows why. Two, you know about me and you're trying to snare me into something. No, you can argue all you like, he persisted almost frantically as the man began to object. You can ask all the questions you like, but I know who I am and I know who I know. Do you? Asked the man. He looked dazed. Marshall felt his legs twitch sharply. Well, I have no intention of sitting here and arguing with you. This entire thing is absurd. I came here for some peace and quiet, a place I've never even been to before, and, Don, we eat here all the time. Nolan looked sick. That's nonsense. Nolan rubbed a hand across his mouth. You actually think this is some kind of con game? He asked. Marshall stared at him. He could feel the heavy pulsing of his heart. Or that, my God, that there's a man impersonating you? Don. The man lowered his eyes. I think, well, if I were you, I'd go to a doctor. Let's stop this, shall we? I suggest one of us leave. He looked around the restaurant. There's plenty of room here. He turned his eyes quickly from the man's stricken face and picked up his martini. Well, he said. The man shook his head. Dear God, he murmured. I said let's stop it, Marshall said through clenched teeth. That's it? Asked Nolan incredulously. You're willing to let it go at that? Marshall started to get up. No, wait. I'll go. Abruptly, he pushed to his feet as if there were a leaden mantle around his shoulders. I don't know what to say, but for God's sake, Don, see a doctor. He stood by the side of the booth a moment longer, looking down at Marshall. Then hastily he turned and walked towards the front door. Marshall watched him leave. When the man had gone, he sank back against the booth wall and stared into his drink. He picked up the toothpick and mechanically stirred the impaled onion around in the glass. When the waitress came, he ordered the first item he saw on the menu. While he ate, he thought about how insane it had been. For unless the man Nolan was a consummate actor, he had been sincerely upset by what had happened. What had happened? An out-and-out case of mistaken identity was one thing. A mistaken identity which seemed not quite unwholly mistaken was another. How had the man known these things about it? About Ruth, Huntington, American Pacific, even his lieutenancy in the 87th Division? How? Suddenly, it struck him. Years ago, he had been a devotee of fantastic fiction. Stories which dealt with trips to the moon, with traveling through time, with all of that. And one of the ideas used repeatedly was that of the alternate universe, a lunatic theory which stated that for every possibility there was a separate universe. Following this theory, there might conceivably be a universe where he knew Nolan, ate at Franco's with him regularly, and had graduated from Columbia a semester earlier. It is absurd, really, yet there it was. What if, in entering Franco's, he had accidentally entered a universe one jot removed from the one he existed in at the office? What if, the thought expanded, People were, without knowing it, continually entering these universes one jot removed. What if he himself had continually entered them and never known until today when in an accidental entry he had gone one step too far? He closed his eyes and shuddered. Dear Lord, he thought, dear Heavenly Lord, I have been working too hard. He felt as if he were standing at the edge of a cliff waiting for someone to push him off. He tried hard not to think about his talk with Nolan. If he had thought about it, he'd have to fit it into the pattern. He wasn't prepared to do that yet. After a while, he paid his check and left the restaurant, the food like cold lead in his stomach. He cabbed to a Pennsylvania station and after a short wait boarded a North Shore train. All the way to Huntington, he sat in the smoker car staring out the passing countryside, an unlit cigarette between his fingers. The heavy pressure in his stomach wouldn't go away. When Huntington was reached, he walked across the station to the cab stand and deliberately got into one of them. Take me home, will you? He looked intently at the driver. Sure thing, Mr. Marshall, said the driver, smiling. Marshall sank back with a wavering sigh and closed his eyes. There was a tingling at his fingertips. You're home early, said the driver. Feeling poorly? Marshall swallowed. Just a headache, he said. Oh, I'm sorry. He rode home. As he rode home, Marshall kept staring at the town, despite himself, looking for discrepancies, for differences. But there were none. Everything was just the same. He felt the pressure letting up. Ruth was in the living room, sewing. Don, she stood and hurried to him. Is something wrong? No, no, he said, putting down his hat. Just a headache. Oh, she led him sympathetically to a chair and helped him off with a suit coat and shoes. I'll get you something right away, she said. Fine. When she was going upstairs, Marshall looked around the familiar room and smiled at it. It was all right now. Ruth was coming down the stairs when the telephone rang. He started up, then fell back again as she called. I'll get it, darling. All right, he said. He watched her in the hallway as she picked up the receiver and said hello. Yes, darling, she said automatically. You... Then she stopped and holding out the receiver stared at it as if it were something monstrous in her hand. She put it back to her ear. You won't be home until late? She asked in a faint voice. Marshall sat there gaping at her, the beats of his heart like something striking at him. Even when she turned to look at him, the receiver lowered in her hand. He couldn't turn away. Please, he thought, please don't say it. Please. Who are you? She asked. And that was The Edge, a story that teeters from Richard Matheson's fascination with the mind's fragility. At 32, Matheson was in Los Angeles scripting for The Twilight Zone, inspired by Freud's theories and his own therapy sessions that made him ponder identity's fragility. It lampooned his career. War's trauma extended to mental breaks, his pulp roots maturing into critiques of perception. Writing this in 1958, he drew from personal highway incidences and family strains, aiming to show how doubt erodes reality. Behind the scenes, Matheson submitted to FNSF, reflecting his frustration with Hollywood's superficial treatments of madness in Twilight Zone scripts. It's a window into what drew him to horror, the feature that one moment of doubt sends us over the edge, a theme that deepens with his brother's death in 1945. Richard Matheson, the visionary behind The Edge, turned a doubt and a descent into madness. This story asks, what lies beyond sanity's brink, and can we pull back? Join us next time for Still Shadows, Visions of Richard Matheson on SL Tonight, as we keep unearthing his enigmas. Like and subscribe. Good night.